I like Ash having his guitar ready, prepped.
I didn't know
Are
what
we
we were
doing
going to
some
do.
kind of
So.
Ours, you know?
We're gonna jam a little bit.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
Welcome to Punching In, a series of roundtable discussions by musicians to share ideas about workflow and collaboration. Hey guys, welcome to Punching In, episode 2. Today we're going to be centering around the special harmonic bond between keys and guitar players, and we're going to try to hone in a little bit on how we create, that unique space in every song for, each other. So today we have Ash Jangda,
Hello.
Nick Monahan,
Howdy.
Jon Ong,
What's up, guys?
and Will Yanez. So guys, tell me a little about yourselves. Let's start with Ash.
Well, I've been playing guitar for, close to 30 years now, something like that. I lost track. Been doing it professionally, since high school. So I've played in all kinds of different scenarios, from a garage band all the way to professional touring, sessions, you name it. I taught for many years. A little bit of everything, really. I've gotten to see the whole spectrum of what it is to be a working musician, and it's a lifestyle for sure. So I've been privileged to work with great artists like Bobby Brown, Willow Smith, Sam Sparrow, Tom Brown, Arturo Sandoval. So it runs the gamut as far as genres and stuff. And a lot of gospel people. I've played with Israel Houghton, Marvin Sapp. Through that time, I've learned to work in a lot of different ensembles, groups, from small stuff where it's just you and a singer, to jazz trios, 10-piece bands, big bands, to pop acts where, you're playing with backing tracks and that kind of thing. So you name it.
You and I mostly worked at the W together, for about a year. Ash, we should get into a little bit of that gig and, how you and I found that sound.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool situation because the sounds, we were able to kind of retain our own personality and leave space for each other to do our thing without compromising how we play. But it was because, it's like a respect thing. You kind of have to listen to decide what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Listening is everything, pretty much.
We're going to get into that today, too.
Yeah.
All right. So, Nick, why don't you give us a little about yourself?
Yeah, I've been playing guitar for about, I want to say maybe 20 years. I went to Berkeley. I think Nick and I went, and John. And then I got done with that in 2013 and moved to LA shortly after, and kind of moved out here and started playing a bunch of casual gigs and, bar gigs and whatever I really could get at the time and stuff, and teaching to kind of make it my way out here. I kind of started playing in some corporate band stuff. I've done some stuff with this band called Family Company. They do a lot of the tributes to we did one for Donny Hathaway, Bill Withers and stuff too. And had a bunch of cool artists kind of play with that. I do some TV stuff, play some guitar with Modern Family and School of Rock stuff on Nickelodeon and stuff.
And Nick, you and I actually met doing that School of Rock gig where we were teaching on set, that was an interesting realm. You and I did a lot of cabarets as well and some studio work, and I think we should kind of hit on that as well, coming up with parts in the studio. Awesome. And John, give us a little about yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, so I think as Nick mentioned earlier, I met Nick Petrillo at Berkeley during the good old college days. I did a lot of session guitar work back then. I think we played in a lot of gigs for a lot of different artists. We played at graduation, right? Didn't we, Nick? With Michael McDonald. Bunch of cool cats. But eventually, when I moved out to LA, where I am now, I ended up doing film scoring. So I'm bringing more of a production music type of approach to this conversation, I think.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that for the last 6-something years, working under composers and bringing my own guitar perspective to film scores. So my hope today is that can be my little contribution.
Awesome. And how about you, Will?
Let's see here. I was born in Chicago, and then I lived in South America in a bunch of different countries, growing up as a kid and then back to Chicago. So I just grew up with a lot of different types of music, a lot of Latin music. My dad's from Colombia, mom's from Mexico. So that's been a big influence. Let's see here. And then I've done a lot of work in either hip hop or Broadway musicals, which is really different. But so I've toured with School of Rock, The Bodyguard, the Kingy Boots of the Pantages last year. But doing the musical tours and stuff has been cool. And then I do a lot of writing and production work in the Latin world, reggaeton and stuff like that too.
You got a big hit out, man. Why don't you talk about that?
I just did a song with Daddy Yankee. I was a writer on it. It came out Friday. And then these big producers, Playing Skills, I work with, they were also featured artists on it. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, you know, like everyone else too, I've done a lot of corporate work, just everything, you know, any types of gigs in town and stuff like that, teaching, and just being able to kind of wear different hats and stuff in the industry, which is like, you know, especially in a town like LA, is so like important.
Yeah, and Will, you and I met on a Michael Orland gig back when.
Yeah, oh yeah, shout out Michael Orland.
Yeah, shout out to Michael Orland for bringing us together. And man, just coming up pretty much in the tech. I mean, hour and a half of rehearsal. You and I really have to figure out, what are you covering? Am I covering the string parts? You know, are you covering one line? You know, thank you for being here with me today and talking for a bit. So I kind of want to begin this discussion around the idea that, you know, for those people listening to this right now that aren't musicians, keyboards and guitars kind of sit within the same audio spectrum, and it could create a lot of mud. It could also create a lot of harmonic tension if some of us are playing extra extensions or extra notes that the other person isn't playing. Yep. So I kind of want to get you guys' feedback on that. Like, if I'm going in heavy duty on like a rock tune or an R&B tune, how are you guys going to fundamentally change your approach to something around that, or vice versa? Like, what would a keys player have to do in that situation if it's a rock tune?
If I juxtapose that with like playing as a solo guitar player in a gig, I'm trying to fill up a lot more space. So I think a lot of the time with that, it's like, it's nice to be able to back off and kind of let you do your thing, see who's taking the driver's seat, I feel like, and, you know, just like leaving more space and stuff. If somebody's trying to say a lot, then I'll just try and kind of back off a little bit more until, you know, and throw little things in here and there and stuff.
One thing I always think about when I'm playing in an acoustic setting versus more of a band setting is allowing the drummer to provide the rhythm approach more than I am. Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to lay back out of the rhythm as much as I possibly can. I don't know if you guys take that approach as well.
I think it varies from genre to genre. So like for example, when you mentioned rock, my first impression would be the timbres are different. So like the guitars are probably going to be maybe heavy distorted kind of thing. The keyboards would tend to be organs, whirlies, or piano. Whereas if you're playing in a pop setting, the keyboard sound takes on a whole lot of different ways it could go, from pads to synths to arpeggiated stuff to, you know, it's a different world, you know what I'm saying? Then you get into like, let's say, some of the more soulful, funky gospel stuff. Sometimes, not all the time, but a lot of times it becomes less harmonic and more rhythmic. Yes. So when you mentioned drums, it's like, I think you would dig in from a guitar perspective, you would dig in more rhythmically. Whereas in a rock thing, you're playing like specific parts. In a gospel setting, it's almost or a funk setting. It could either be like the icing, you know what I'm saying? Like it's kind of like you're sprinkling all these different colors and little things and rhythm and stuff around, and catching licks and the lines and that kind of thing, which is a little different, you know what I'm saying? And about backing off, that is relative to the type of tune or the genre, you know what I'm saying? Because there's times when the keys are like really driving it versus the guitar, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm. And then I like to tell you guys to do something like add colors, right? Because then it's more, you're actually adding the spice on top. You're adding the upper structures. You're adding those nice harmonic notes that aren't covered in the piano part.
Right. Yeah. Well, sometimes, yeah. I think sometimes Nick mentioned when he plays solo, you know, like in a trios type setting, he's going to be playing a lot of fuller. Well, that would include, you know, some more of the lower register stuff in the middle. Right. Whereas if you're playing with a piano player and he has a heavy left hand, you're probably just going to play on the upper 3 strings, maybe the 4th string, and your voicings are going to be not necessarily down here in the first hand position. You're going to probably play from about the 5th fret up, and just kind of stay out of the way. You know what I'm saying? Because of that basic logic of like it's going to get muddy in the middle. So, but that can invert. You know what I mean? Sometimes if you're listening to each other. Sometimes the piano player goes up, then you can kind of come down for a minute.
It's a conversation, right? You're like interacting with each other. That's how you know a band is like tight when they're actually listening and you can see people adapting and not everyone's just in their own little corner and doing their own little thing. So definitely.
So Ash, that actually brings up a good point because when we were playing that gig together, you know, a lot of the times I would either be on synth pads or organ most of the time. And you would be taking the bulk of the harmonic sound. I mean, I would only be covering 1 or 2 notes in that section.
Well, I mean, you were doing a lot of stuff too. You were busy guy. You were running the band, running the track.
Sounds about right.
When you can hear that, you're using your ear, you can fill in the things that I cannot get to when I'm band leading.
This is how it always was growing up in Chicago too. I was always playing with people that would read a lot of music, and then I was playing with my friends that didn't read any music, more ear players. And I guess it's knowing like who you're playing with too. Let's say I'm playing with somebody in a setting and I say like, oh, what chord are we going to do here? Like some guys are going to tell you that they're going to play like a D minor in the left hand and an F major in the right hand. You have to know that means D minor 9. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like however you figure it out, but it's like being yourself, but also adapting to who you're with so you could have that conversation. That's kind of really important too. And then also like rock was mentioned earlier, and a lot of times in rock there might not be, you know, a keyboard in that situation. So it's like you can use all 6 strings, but as mentioned earlier, you know, a lot of times I'll use 3 note voicings, 4 note voicings. And then or single note stuff too. And a lot of it too is like I think of it like icing on a cake, you know, like giving flavor and stuff. Paul Jackson Jr. to me is always like one of the greatest examples of somebody that plays effortlessly.
He's great. He's great. Love him.
Because he's so rhythmic, but it's like all like the stuff he did, which is
Yeah.
a masterclass.
You think about like, you know, rock, it's usually generally more guitar oriented and this and that. But even if you think about like pop music today, what the guitars are doing for Maroon 5, you know what I mean? As opposed to like the synth stuff that's leading the way, and kind of had that 80s vibe coming back too.
Well, actually, let's go genre specific. Let's start in the jazz realm first, because I think that's the place where it could get the muddiest for all of us.
What was it, Freddie Green? Or
Yeah, Freddie Green.
Yeah. He was the guy who kind of like set the standard of like, if you're going to do the chunking thing, just stay on the 3rds and 7ths and voice lead kind of thing.
Right.
Like safe way to outline the changes and not get in anybody's way, because you have a whole horn section.
Exactly.
You got the piano player. Sometimes you have a singer.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot going on, right?
Yeah.
That role of guitar in that ensemble is totally different than, let's say, a quartet. Because in a quartet, I mean, you could be doing double stops. You could do stuff like that complements the melody.
Yep.
You could do some of the upper structure stuff, like you mentioned earlier, Nick. You can do color stuff out. I mean, there's a crazy album, I think it's called The Bridge. It's gorgeous. Like, basically, the way that they kind of like dance around each other. The idea is, like, depending on the instrumentation, that role can change. That chunka thing is the safe spot when there's like 20 people on stage. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. As that number comes down, like your freedom level goes up. You know what I'm saying? Like
there's more space to
it's like a video game, you know, when you get to the next level and now you have all these other powers and things.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy there.
I have extensions. All right, cool.
I think something I learned in school really quickly early on was that less is more as a guitar player. You come into school kind of entitled, thinking you're going to learn all these crazy jazz chords, these crazy voicings, and you play them on your own in the practice room. You're like, oh, this sounds so dope. And then you get to like a band or anything, and immediately like half of it is cut out. Yep. And so basically at the end of the day, you're thinking like a sound engineer in a way. You're trying to mix yourself into the band. And so you're trying to cut out all of the low mid stuff. And what you're left with is mostly just like, you know, things that you guys have talked about, like upper stuff, you know, octaves even. Sometimes if it needs to be clean, you know, just the bare bones. And that's what you're there for a lot of times as a guitarist, is to be like the rhythm for a lot of these groups, I think.
You know, John, it's funny you mentioned that, because I have a funny Ken Zambello story. We were playing one of the tunes at Singer Showcase, and it was a reggae tune. And I was doing like the standard that thing, just like the double eighths and then the one order at the end on beat 4. And he calls me out and he's like, man, get rid of that second eighth, man. You don't need it. Just put it on 2 and 4. Just because there's no room, man. You use Singer Showcase. There's 25 people on stage.
You guys know Chris Cadenhead, the keyboardist?
Yeah.
We were just talking and we were saying like, because he used to do this thing with Mara Jose, and we were just saying like how nice it is play with like a really good singer. You know what I'm saying? Because then your whole concept changes.
Sure.
Like you're not trying to fill all the space and like, oh, look what I could do. Look what I could do.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, oh, let me leave some space to see what they could do, because they can really sing. Makes you play very complimentary when you have like a strong front person. I think the band relaxes.
So, Will, I want to ask you something with complex harmony, because theater gigs, in my opinion, have some of the densest harmony structures out there. I mean, along with jazz, because they're
Yeah.
completely heavily orchestrated. How are you handling some of those dense harmonic figures in a pit?
Well, it all comes down to like the style. So like doing School of Rock was different because it was like, you know, they write like G5 means power chord. But I
can play
love
that.
some G5. Yeah, G5 is my favorite. But no, it's like, but knowing like how to kind of do that one and just like get inside the style, like it's gonna be all down, you know, like punk. It's not down up down up down. It's dun, 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 dun. But then like yeah, I think Dear Evan Hansen had asked me to audition for it before they went on tour, and the guy Alex Lackmore, he did the orchestrations for that, who did Hamilton and all that. And he's kind of notorious for his guitar voicings being extremely hard. And he'll do stuff where it's like every single finger is utilized and it's like minor seconds and your hands look like this. And you have to play for his stuff. So sometimes, a lot of times it's very specific written, the voicings, but sometimes they just give you the option. They'll say like F minor 9 and stuff. And in that case, again, it's, dealing with the harmonies in the context of the song that it is, you know? So it's like, bits of jazz kind of being part of the show, or being there kind of with the MD, and there'll be another keyboard player and seeing kind of what they're doing. So that it's kind of trippy because it's like you're reading the music within the context of it. And but yeah, and I would recommend that anybody. I mean, there's some shows I play that don't have cast recording because it was the first time, you know, that I did it. So, but sometimes if you get to do like a theater show that already has like a cast recording, maybe listen to what the guy was doing on that, because I'm sure the music supervisor, orchestrator approved it if it was in the recording. But yeah, just kind of being smart with it. And but yeah, a lot of times it is written, you know, by hand, and you have to do it all and play it.
Nick, you and I did that session, and it was an organ acoustic guitar gig just to make that recording. In that setting, it was all about you being more rhythmic because I was doing all pads. I was staying out of her alto range. You were staying more in the baritone tenor land. And I was up near soprano, but not too shimmery, because you were trying to keep the whole thing kind of reeled in. You also need to be cognizant of because all three of those instruments are really right out there. You can't leave any blemishes in that song. So all of those need to be really orchestrated, thought out. Who's providing the low end, who's providing the high end, where is the lead sitting? You know, if you have a sax player, where is the sax player sitting? Is it a tenor or an alto?
Totally. Well, that was like a blues thing, right? You know, trying to get like those, you know, like stereotypical sounds kind of going to best fit the, you know, fit the song and stuff.
You can do that with your tone too. So like, you know, every guitar player here can attest to the fact that the most number of pedals that we have of as far as type is overdrives. We all have many overdrives.
Yeah.
And that's because that's like where you're really going to get a lot of variety. You know what I mean? Your delays, obviously, some are nicer than others, and your amps are going to give you different type of tones and your different types of guitars. But for rock and like rootsy stuff like that, overdrives is really where you're going to start. But the first step is picking the right guitar.
Is it really all about guitar, really?
It dictates a lot of the sound.
Well, yeah, I guess it's like, you know, the guitar, you have, you know, like P90s, you got, you know, humbuckers and stuff like that, which humbuckers are more of a rock sound. And yeah, just distinct sounds.
A single coil is going to be kind of noisier. So you can get like noiseless single coil pickups on a guitar, or a humbucker will be like less noisy with the computer interference. That's something you could easily, if there's any guitar players watching, sometimes like if the producer's freaking out about it, like, oh, why is this guitar noisy? Just take your guitar and like angle it a little bit away from the computer screen. That usually fixes the problem, and it eliminates stress.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that the guitar, it's starting from the guitar itself, it makes a huge difference. Like for a lot of, I guess, production music, I don't think you would use humbuckers because it's too muddy. You definitely want like a Strat or a Tele type of sound if you're going to use the electric guitar on like again, I'm talking about like film score or like, you know, that kind of stuff. You definitely don't want a Les Paul or a PRS like the one I have on the wall behind me. You want something that would immediately fit in the mix nicely, and then you add, like Ash was saying, all the other effects that you need. But definitely it goes back to what Ash was saying too, that you know, you should listen to what the client, or you know, what the producer or what the artist wants as well, and aim for that sound too, because we're all, it's a commercial thing at the end of the day, right?
John, you said earlier, you know, when you're playing these jazz things in college, and us as guitar players think we have to do the whole show and stuff like that. So it is actually kind of funny to take the step back and go, well, okay, like wow, how can I do all of that with as little notes as possible and stuff too. I think there's something to be said for sure, you know.
Yep.
I'm seeing a lot of guitarists going DI. They're either going to reamp it at the end, or they're going to put it through a virtual amp or whatever. How do you guys feel about that? Because isn't that part of the bulk of your sound?
A lot of the stuff I produce, I use, if I print it fine, I'll do like Kemper.
Yeah.
I mean, I have like a Blackface Princeton. I love old Fender amps. They're like old cars to me. It's easy to fix.
Yeah.
Sound great. But I think, but yeah, as far as virtual amps, sometimes it's like if you're gonna do it yourself, you need to make edits later. So if I'm writing, I almost use like virtual amps because I can make changes, as opposed to if I'm doing something where it's like the idea and it's a demo. There's going to be like the label might get to give me notes and say, oh, like we need to change this sound. So that's why I don't use like an analog synth. Like I'll use like Omnisphere or something first. I can change it. And then if I print it final, but it's like if you're going to do a session for somebody and it's going to be the final, then yeah, I would say it depends. I mean, there's a lot of really good virtual amps out there. Kemper has been great to use on tours. I use it in the studio personally. Wow. And then real amps. So it's just depending on you and the sound you like and stuff like that. I did a session like 2 years ago for Top Chef Junior. I had to like replay the theme song, and it was like they're like, oh, Nels Klein did it before. I was like, oh man. But I remember like I had to go in and like do the virtual amps for the composer. Wow. And show him how to get like a really cool sound and stuff. And at that point I was like producing stuff more, and so I kind of knew that. But that's another really cool thing to know as far as tone, is to kind of be able to go in and be like, oh, you're using Logic, let me do this, you know.
Do you guys feel, because listen, if you're playing an unweighted keyboard, it's way different than playing a grand piano.
Totally.
The same level of weight not having an amp next to you as you do going DI. Is there a difference in your opinion about it?
As live, yeah, I'd rather not go direct if I don't have to.
Right.
But there are scenarios where it's just more practical, you know, like definitely church settings sometimes and stuff like that. But I would say to the virtual stuff, it's come a long way from its inception. Yep. You know,
100%.
When stuff like Amplitude and GTR and all the stuff came out like way back in the day, it just didn't sound. Even like all the Line 6 stuff didn't sound right. You know, it sounded good within the context. Yeah, but then you know, like you can take a Helix today, and dude, it'll fool you. It'll fool you, especially if you run it through some. I would say to home recording, as far as what I find that all the top guys from Nashville all the way across to LA to New York are doing, is they are using real heads. They're using cab synth. That's where it's at now, so that you can really get your sound. You know, and all these guys will have like, you know, 10 plus heads in their setup. You know what I'm saying? Right. From high gain stuff to like really clean Fender stuff to like you name it. But they're all dialed into either like a 2 notes or like a server reload or Oxbox. Any one of those will let you, you know, take your real sound and, you know, just drop it in the box. You're not making noise. You know what I'm saying? You can record late night. I mean, they're pretty much simulating the amps. I think UAD, they have that Fender plugin. Obviously, it's better to have the amp. But like,
it's always better.
But it's not always practical.
I also think just stage volume too. I mean, I'm always getting that from front of house, is just stage volume. Jon, I'd love to hear your context in the film scoring world, because I feel like tone is so important in that world. Just finding the right thing to go with an orchestral score.
So my thoughts on that are a little different. I think people are still a lot more. Again, I don't know how every composer or, you know, guitarist composer type person is doing it. But I feel like a lot of people are still pretty purist in that world, and that you definitely want to record as real of an amp and, you know, pedals and all. You want all that stuff, because a lot of the times the guitar is one of the few live instruments that you're going to have on, you know, sample libraries. So you want that to be real, because it's the affordable thing.
Right.
You know, that you can record when you can't afford to record everything else. So I think in that world, I think people go the other way. I wouldn't say that people don't use Kempers or some of the other amazing emulations I think Neural DSP makes some really good plugins, if you've heard of them. I definitely think that for a lot of these instruments in the film scoring world, you want to record with a mic on an amp with all your analog stuff as much as possible, because people really pay attention to that fidelity.
It's amazing just what Logic has as far as amps. If I'm doing correct guitar arpeggiation, it's amazing what I could make a MIDI guitar sound like nowadays. I'm kind of shocked.
Agree.
Yeah, that used to be one of my biggest pet peeves is MIDI guitar and MIDI saxophone. It's the funniest samples ever.
Well, especially if you're playing guitar like you're playing a piano, like an E major triad. You know what I mean? It's like, one thing I generally like to do when I'm band leading, and I ask guitarists I work with a lot, is if there's a synth part I can't cover that is guitaristic, cover that, and vice versa. If we're talking about like a heart tune or something, I maybe could cover some of the rhythmic guitars with an organ patch or a piano patch or something. I call it propping up. You know, if we have a quartet and we have a singer, how do we make this sound like the original track given the instruments that we have, instead of somebody laying out for the tune or just adding something that's not necessary throughout the track?
I think sometimes I approach that stuff with, like, if it's like a horn part or something like that, if I'll kind of think like guitar solo, like chord solo. I mean, because if you think about tracks nowadays and stuff like that too, like there's just so many parts, and it doesn't have to be necessarily like a horn part. It could be, you know, whatever, like these little, you know, ad libs that are whatever instrument in the track.
Will, you would cover a lot of that stuff in these cabaret or musical theater settings if it's like a clarinet line that I don't have the extra hand to get to that patch.
If it's something that's iconic to the song, it merits, you know, somebody making it happen somehow. It's almost like a lyric or something. You can't leave it out.
Yeah.
You know, I think from playing in a lot of like gospel and like funk settings where there's horns, with the absence of it, it's instinctual almost to the people in the rhythm section to compensate for it. Whatever they couldn't get to, it was either going to be you or me. So we would just kind of look at each other and be like, all right, who's going to do it? And then, but we never really like talked about it. We just kind of instinctually like, but to speak to that requires a different kind of concept, in the sense that some people do think in their little box and they're like, I'm just responsible for my part. That means that not that they can't play the part, but that they probably never thought to learn it because they never thought it was their duty to. Have you guys heard of that guitar player, Eric Walls?
I've heard of that name, actually.
Yeah, he's like one of the craziest, amazing gospel guitar players. The church that he used to play at, they didn't have a keyboard player.
Got it.
He took like a rhythmic keyboard approach to all the triadic stuff that happens in those gospel songs, where he has the melody on top, the meat of it in the middle, but he's keeping the time too. So it was just like him and a drummer. You know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. And that's kind of like what happened there.
I will say, all four of you guys, if I had you on a gig, I would trust that we would all be using our ear and distinguishing what is necessary and what is needed. I mean, if you're learning a song, you're learning a song. You know, if you're learning one of the Michael Jackson tracks from Thriller, you know all of the part, you know, the synth parts, the horn parts, everything. And if there's one part that sticks out, that plays off the melody or is iconic, all of us are in the realm to know that and to play it if it's not being taken care of in that moment. Obviously, like, listen, all of those songs have iconic keys parts and iconic guitar parts. You know, I'm not saying not to cover those, but, you know, if there's a horn line that needs to get covered, I would say that any one of us would be able to cover it. So it's all about listening, I would say.
For the other Nick, you mentioned some plugins. What were the ones that you suggested? Did you mention a Marshall and a couple other things?
Yeah, the Marshall Plexi. It's just a U audio plugin and stuff like that. But yeah, it's crazy how many varieties, sounds you can get out of that thing.
What I'll do is I'll go 3 outs. I have like an Apogee quartet. I'll go left, go stereo, and then the third out is DI. You're tracking your final print, but then you also have the DI guitar, so it's dry simultaneously. And that, to me, is one of my favorite ways to do it, because then what I can do is I could have my chosen sounds and then the dry signal for the client. And I might even go and send the dry signal, because I know when I have my own productions, I like to mix the dry with the wet and all that.
Sometimes you have to double apart, and it's nice to just have the DI, because you can try out a bunch of different things and get 2 different amps going on different sides and bang them out instead of tracking everything twice.
Yeah, it's like MIDI. It's like having MIDI and being able to put different synths and stuff on.
You can stack different amp models and different hues and different drives. Now you have like this really thick sounding, section of,
Wow.
Like to make a chorus like Blossom Wall sound.
Guys, this was really amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man.
Everybody
Thanks
on.
for having us, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and stay creative.
All right.
All right.
You guys.
You guys.